The room was alive with music and laughter, the kind of party that hums with an undercurrent of excitement. Evan was at the center of it all, naturally. His birthday was always a big deal. People milled about, toasting him, sharing inside jokes, and weaving in and out of conversations. I stood beside him, holding a glass of wine, feeling his energy radiate like the confident guy I had always known. But somewhere in the pit of my stomach, there was this restless feeling. It wasn't that I didn't love him, I did, deeply, but sometimes, I felt like we'd gotten too comfortable. Almost stagnant. As Evan moved away to chat with a group of his college buddies, I found myself standing with Jack, his best friend since forever. Jack and I always had a playful rapport, a kind of teasing banter that never went beyond the bounds of friendship. He was tall and sharp-witted, always knowing how to lighten the mood with his sarcasm. "Looks like the birthday boy's having a great time," Jack said, sipping his beer. "Yeah, he's in his element," I replied, glancing over at Evan. He was laughing with his friends, completely absorbed. He didn't even seem to notice me standing there, and I felt that familiar twinge of being on the sidelines. Jack must have caught the shift in my expression because he nudged me playfully. "What's up, Nina? You look bored." If I didn't know any better, I'd say you were about to start some trouble. A mischievous idea crossed my mind then, fueled by the champagne bubbles in my veins and that gnawing sense of invisibility. I grinned at Jack. "Maybe I am." His brow arched, intrigued. "Oh yeah? What kind of trouble?" Without thinking it through, I leaned in and kissed him, just a quick peck on the lips, barely a breath, but enough to shock him and anyone watching. It was supposed to be harmless. A joke. A way to get Evan's attention. Jack froze, blinking at me. "Whoa, Nina," he whispered, stepping back, clearly caught off guard. "What are you doing?" I laughed, but it sounded forced, even to me. "Relax, it was just a joke. You know, to mess with Evan a little." I glanced over at Evan, expecting him to smirk or give me some flustered reaction. But instead, I saw something else, his smile fading, his laughter disappearing as he locked eyes with me from across the room. The room felt like it suddenly got smaller. Everything went still for a moment, and my pulse quickened as I saw the hurt and disbelief in his eyes. He turned abruptly, pushing past a few people as he headed straight for the door. "Evan!" I called out, panic rising in my chest. I hadn't meant for it to go like this. I wasn't sure what I had meant, but it wasn't this. Jack's hand landed on my arm, his voice low and tense. "What the hell, Nina? Why did you do that?" I pulled my arm free, my heart racing. "I don't know, I didn't think he'd react like that. It was supposed to be funny." Jack shook his head, running a hand through his hair, his usual laid-back demeanor replaced with frustration. "Well, it wasn't funny. Not to him, not to me." He sighed, looking past me toward the door where Evan had disappeared. "You should go talk to him. Fix this." "I know," I muttered, already regretting everything as the reality of what I had done began to sink in. I rushed out of the room, my footsteps quickening as I followed Evan outside. He was standing in the garden, hands on his hips, staring out at the darkened sky. The cool night air hit me as I stepped out, the contrast with the warm party inside making everything feel sharp and raw. "Evan," I called softly, approaching him cautiously. He didn't turn around. "What the hell was that, Nina?" I started, but the words caught in my throat. What could I say? That it was all a joke. That I hadn't meant anything by it. That somehow, kissing his best friend had seemed like a good idea in the moment. It sounded pathetic even in my head. "I was just trying to get your attention," I finally managed, my voice small. "By kissing Jack." He turned to face me now, and the anger in his eyes cut through me. "You could have just asked for my attention. Or, I don't know, not kissed my best friend in front of everyone." "I thought you'd laugh," I said weakly, trying to explain, even though I could see how hollow it sounded. He let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. You think it's funny? Watching you kiss him? It wasn't like that, Evan, I swear, I said, stepping closer, but he moved back. It was just a stupid joke, okay? I didn't mean to hurt you. His eyes narrowed, the hurt in them now replaced with something colder, sharper. You didn't think, Nina. You never think. That stopped me in my tracks. What's that supposed to mean? It means that you're always pulling stunts like this, always trying to get a reaction. But you never stop to think how it affects other people. You act like everything's a game. His words were sharp, each one landing with precision. I opened my mouth to argue, to defend myself, but I couldn't. He wasn't entirely wrong. I had a tendency to push boundaries, to see how far I could go before things broke. But I had never imagined it would be like this. Evan, I didn't want to hurt you, I whispered, my voice cracking. I love you. You know that, right? He stared at me for a long moment, his expression softening just slightly before hardening again. I don't know what I know anymore, Nina. Right now, I just need some space. I felt my heart drop as he turned and walked away, leaving me standing alone under the cold night sky, the party continuing behind me as if nothing had happened. The days that followed the party felt like a descent into a foggy abyss. Evan and I were like two ships passing in the night, barely acknowledging each other, the silence between us growing thicker with every passing hour. I tried to reach out, but each time I did, he would shut me down, his walls growing higher and higher. At first, I thought time would heal the rift between us. I kept replaying that night in my head, hoping that maybe I could figure out a way to fix things. But as the sun rose and fell, the reality of our situation sank deeper. I found myself lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, consumed by guilt. What had started as a playful joke had unraveled into something far more serious. One evening, I decided to confront Evan after work. I waited for him to come home, my stomach in knots as I paced the living room, rehearsing what I wanted to say. When the door finally opened, Evan stepped in, his face tired and drawn. Hey, he said, avoiding eye contact as he dropped his bag on the floor. Hey, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Can we talk? He sighed heavily and ran a hand through his hair, his frustration evident. I don't know, Nina. What's there to talk about? I took a step closer, my heart racing. I just want to explain, to tell you how sorry I am. I never meant to hurt you. He leaned against the kitchen counter, crossing his arms defensively. Then why did you do it? Why did you kiss Jack? It was a stupid mistake. I exclaimed, my emotions bubbling to the surface. I thought it would be funny, just a harmless joke. I didn't think it would hurt you this way. His expression hardened. That's the thing, isn't it? You don't think. You never stop to consider how your actions affect other people. That's not fair, I countered, my voice trembling. I love you, Evan. I've always loved you. I don't want to lose you over a stupid kiss. He looked away, the tension in the room palpable. It's not just about the kiss, Nina. It's everything. You make me feel like I'm not enough, like I have to compete for your attention. My heart sank at his words. That's not true. I never meant to make you feel that way. I just wanted to have a little fun, to shake things up. Well, maybe we didn't need shaking up. Maybe we just needed to be stable for once, he shot back, frustration lacing his voice. I opened my mouth to respond, but the words caught in my throat. The more we talked, the more I felt like I was losing him. Evan, please. Can we just try to work through this? He looked at me then, his eyes filled with a mix of pain and anger. I don't know if I can, Nina. Right now, I just need some space to think. With that, he turned and walked out of the room, leaving me standing there, feeling utterly defeated. Days turned into weeks, and the chasm between us widened. I felt the weight of the silence pressing down on me, suffocating in its intensity. I tried to occupy myself with work, friends, anything to distract me from the gnawing feeling of loss. But nothing seemed to work. Evan had become a ghost in our shared life, and I was left grappling with my guilt and regret. One evening, I met up with Jack at a local coffee shop. He had been trying to stay neutral, but I needed to talk to someone who understood the mess we were in. "Nina, you need to clear the air with Evan," Jack said, stirring his coffee absent-mindedly. "This isn't just going to fix itself." "I know that, but he won't talk to me." "He's so closed off right now," I replied, feeling tears prick at my eyes. Jack frowned, concern etched on his face. "You can't keep letting this eat you alive. Just tell him how you feel." "I don't know if it will even matter," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "He's been so distant. I think I really hurt him." Jack sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Look, I get it. What you did was reckless, but it was a mistake. You have to show him you're willing to make amends." As we talked, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe Jack was right. I decided that I would make one last effort to reach out to Evan. But deep down, I was terrified of what I might find. That night, I texted Evan, asking him to meet me at our favorite park. My heart raced as I waited for his reply. When he finally responded, saying he'd come, I felt a mix of anticipation and dread. When I arrived, the park was quiet, bathed in the soft glow of the streetlights. I paced nervously, trying to gather my thoughts. I spotted Evan walking toward me, his expression unreadable. "Thanks for coming," I said, forcing a smile. He nodded but didn't say anything. We stood there in awkward silence for a moment before I finally spoke up. "Evan, I know I messed up. I can't change what happened, but I want to try and fix this. I miss you." He looked at me, his gaze piercing. "You think just saying you're sorry is enough?" "No, I don't. But I want to show you that I can be better," I pleaded, desperation creeping into my voice. "I love you, Evan. I don't want to lose you over a mistake." He took a deep breath, his eyes softening just a fraction. "It's hard for me to trust you right now, Nina. What if you do it again? What if this is just who you are?" "That's not who I am," I insisted, my voice trembling. "I just wanted to get a rise out of you. I didn't think it would cause this much damage. You have to understand how it felt, seeing you with Jack. It felt like you were choosing him over me." "I would never choose anyone over you," I said, tears spilling down my cheeks. "Please, just give me a chance to prove it." He looked away, his jaw tight. "I don't know if I can do that right now." The rejection hit me like a physical blow, and I felt a deep, aching despair settle in my chest. I watched him turn away, and in that moment, I knew the fallout from my careless actions was far from over. The next few days passed in a blur of sadness. Evan continued to withdraw, the silence between us stretching longer and longer. I felt a mix of guilt, confusion, and an overwhelming sense of loss. My heart ached for the love we once shared, now tainted by my reckless mistake. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I realized the true depth of what I had done. I had pushed him away, and it felt as if I was losing a part of myself in the process. What started as a playful joke had spiraled into something I never could have anticipated, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it might be too late to fix what had been broken. Days turned into weeks, and the silence in our apartment became unbearable. The once lively space felt suffocating, filled with unspoken words and unresolved feelings. I tried to find solace in the mundane, work, gym sessions, and evenings spent binge-watching shows, but nothing dulled the ache in my heart. The weight of my actions pressed down on me, and I was haunted by the thought of losing Evan for good. One evening, I decided that enough was enough. I couldn't keep tiptoeing around the truth. It was time to face the reality of our situation head-on. I texted Evan, asking him to meet me at the park again. To my surprise, he agreed. As I walked through the park, the familiar sights brought back memories of happier times. I remembered the picnics, the late-night walks, and the laughter we shared. But now, all that felt like a distant dream. When I arrived, I spotted Evan sitting on a bench, his gaze fixed on the ground. My heart raced as I approached him, a mix of anxiety and determination swirling in my chest. "Hey," I said softly, taking a seat beside him. "Hey," he replied without looking up, his voice flat. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. "Thanks for meeting me." I wanted to talk, really talk. He finally looked at me, his expression guarded. "What is there to say, Nina? You've made your feelings pretty clear." I swallowed hard, fighting the sting of tears. "I know I messed up. I never meant to hurt you, Evan. The kiss with Jack was a stupid mistake, a moment of weakness. I can't stop thinking about how I hurt you." "Can you honestly say that you didn't mean to hurt me?" he asked, his voice rising slightly. "It was more than a joke, Nina. It felt like a betrayal. You put me in a position where I felt less than." I reached out, touching his arm. "I didn't think of it that way. I just thought it would be fun, a way to get a reaction from you. I never expected it would spiral into this." Evan pulled away, shaking his head. "You keep saying that, but it doesn't change how I felt. You made a choice that night." "I know," I said, my heart racing. "And I regret it every single day. But you shutting me out isn't helping either of us." He sighed, looking away, frustration evident on his face. "I don't know how to just get over it, Nina. You might see it as a joke, but to me, it was a sign of something deeper, a lack of respect for our relationship." I nodded, realizing he was right. "I see that now. I never wanted to disrespect you. I just wanted to feel alive, to break the monotony. But I realize now that I hurt you instead. And I'm sorry. I want to fix this. I want to be the partner you deserve." He looked at me, vulnerability flashing in his eyes. "You say that, but I don't know if I can trust you again. You've shattered something between us, and I don't know how to rebuild it. Please, give me a chance," I pleaded, my voice trembling. "I love you, Evan. I want to make it right. I'm willing to do whatever it takes." Evan sighed deeply, rubbing the back of his neck. "It's not just about saying sorry. It's about changing behaviors, about showing that you can be committed to this relationship without doing things that jeopardize it." I bit my lip, feeling the tears well up in my eyes. "I promise I will. I'll work on it, I'll change. Just don't give up on us yet." He stood up abruptly, turning away from me. "I don't know if I can believe you. I've been talking to someone else." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. "What do you mean? Talking to someone else? Is it serious?" I asked, my voice shaking. "It's not serious," he replied, his back still turned to me. "But I needed someone to talk to, someone who wasn't wrapped up in this mess. I didn't know how to deal with everything that happened between us, and I guess I thought it would help." "Evan, please," I said, desperation creeping into my tone. "You can't be serious. You can't move on with someone else while we're still trying to figure this out." "I wasn't trying to move on," he shot back, finally turning to face me. "I was just trying to survive." "Survive? You think talking to someone else is going to help?" I asked incredulously. "That's not fair to me or to us. If we're going to work through this, it has to be just us." He took a step closer, his eyes intense. "You don't get to dictate how I cope with my feelings. I've been hurt too, Nina. You're not the only one who has to deal with this fallout." Silence hung heavily between us, the air thick with tension. My mind raced, and I struggled to process the reality of what he was saying. I wanted to scream, to shake him, to make him understand that I was willing to change, to fight for us. But instead, I felt a deep sense of helplessness. "I just don't want to lose you," I whispered, tears streaming down my cheeks. Evan softened slightly, his expression faltering. "I don't want to lose you either, but I need time to think about everything." I nodded, knowing that I couldn't force him to feel something he wasn't ready to. "I'll give you time. But please, just promise me you won't let this talking to someone else turn into something more." "I can't promise that," he replied, his voice quiet. "But I will promise to think about what we've talked about." He turned to walk away, and I felt my heart shatter all over again. As he faded into the distance, I realized that the confrontation had opened up a deeper wound in our relationship. The fear of losing him felt more real than ever, and I knew I had to confront not only my mistakes but also the fragile foundation of our love. As I left the park, I felt a mixture of resolve and despair. I couldn't just sit back and let things fall apart. I had to take control of my destiny and show Evan that I was willing to fight for us. But as the night air chilled around me, I knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, and the stakes were higher than I had ever imagined. The courtroom loomed before me like a dark cloud, its stark walls and harsh fluorescent lights reflecting the weight of the situation. It was hard to believe that my once vibrant relationship with Evan had devolved into this, an ugly confrontation that had become a public spectacle. As I stood in the hallway, my heart raced. I could feel the stares of curious onlookers as I waited for the proceedings to begin. I glanced at my lawyer, Sarah, who was reviewing her notes with a furrowed brow. "You're going to be okay, Nina," she said, giving me an encouraging smile. "Just remember to stick to the facts. Keep your emotions in check." "Easier said than done," I murmured, my throat dry with anxiety. "This is about so much more than just a kiss. It's about everything we built together." Sarah nodded. "I understand. Just focus on what matters today, your side of the story." As the courtroom doors opened, I took a deep breath and stepped inside. The room was filled with people, lawyers, spectators, and even a few journalists, their notepads ready to capture every moment. I spotted Evan sitting at the plaintiff's table, his face a mask of tension and anger. Our eyes met briefly, and a wave of regret washed over me. I took my place at the defendant's table, and the judge, a stern-looking woman in her 50s, entered the room. The gavel slammed down, silencing the murmurs. "Court is now in session," she said. "We will begin with the plaintiff's opening statement." Evan's lawyer, Mr. Thomas, stood up and adjusted his glasses. "Your Honor, we are here today because the defendant, Ms. Nina Harrison, has caused emotional distress to my client through her reckless actions. A playful kiss with Mr. Jack Thompson, a close friend of my client, has shattered their relationship, leading to a chain reaction of distrust and betrayal." My heart raced as Mr. Thomas continued. "This is not just a minor infraction, this is about the principles of love and fidelity. My client deserves justice for the hurt inflicted upon him." I clenched my fists under the table, feeling the weight of his words. The tension in the room was palpable. The judge nodded and turned her attention to Evan. "Mr. Johnson, would you like to take the stand?" Mr. Thomas asked, gesturing toward Evan. Evan stood, his movements stiff. He approached the witness stand and took a seat, his expression a mixture of anger and vulnerability. I could see how hard this was for him, and it made my heart ache. "Mr. Johnson, can you describe how Ms. Harrison's actions affected you?" Mr. Thomas asked, his tone deceptively calm. Evan took a deep breath, glancing at me before answering. "Nina's kiss with Jack was more than just a joke. It was a violation of our trust. I felt betrayed and humiliated in front of our friends. It felt like she was throwing away everything we had built together." "Did you have a relationship with someone else after this incident?" Mr. Thomas pressed. "Yes," Evan replied, his voice steady but low. "I spoke to someone else as a way to cope with the pain, but it was never serious. I just needed someone to talk to." "Did you discuss your feelings about Nina's actions with this other person?" "Yes, but I realize now that it wasn't the right way to handle things. I was hurt and confused," Evan admitted. Mr. Thomas turned to me, a slight smirk on his face. "So, Ms. Harrison's actions led you to seek comfort elsewhere?" Evan hesitated. "It wasn't about replacing Nina. It was more about finding someone who understood my pain." Mr. Thomas nodded, then turned his attention back to me. "Thank you, Mr. Johnson. You may step down. As Evan left the stand, I felt the heat of the courtroom turn toward me. My stomach twisted with anxiety. I knew I had to confront the truth of my actions. Ms. Harrison, would you like to take the stand? Sarah urged softly. I nodded, standing up and walking to the witness stand. As I settled in, I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders. Ms. Harrison, can you explain your side of the story regarding the kiss with Mr. Thompson? Mr. Thomas asked, his tone cutting. I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. It was a stupid mistake. I thought it would be funny, a harmless way to provoke a reaction from Evan. I never imagined it would lead to this. Harmless, he echoed, raising an eyebrow. You kissed his best friend. Can you truly say that was harmless? It was a moment of poor judgment, I replied, my voice shaky. I was trying to break the tension between us. I never meant to hurt Evan. I loved him, and I still do. Is that why you reached out to him afterward, trying to rekindle the relationship? He pressed. Yes, I tried to apologize and make things right. But I never expected Evan to shut me out completely, I said, feeling tears prick at my eyes. Were you aware that Mr. Johnson was hurt by your actions? Mr. Thomas continued. I didn't realize the full extent of it until it was too late, I confessed. I was so wrapped up in my own feelings that I failed to see how my actions affected him. And you admit that Mr. Johnson sought comfort with another woman in his pain? Yes, and I can't blame him for that. I put him in a position where he felt alone and betrayed, I said, my voice breaking. But that doesn't justify the hostility between us now. Mr. Thomas leaned back, his expression smug. No further questions, Your Honor. As I stepped down from the stand, I felt a mixture of relief and despair. I had shared my truth, but the damage had already been done. The judge looked at both of us, her expression unreadable. I will take a short recess before making a decision on the matter. As the gavel hit the wood, I turned to Evan, who was sitting in silence, his face a mask of conflicted emotions. Evan, please, I said, stepping closer to him. I'm sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. Can we please talk? He shook his head, his expression hardening. What's there to say, Nina? You chose to betray me, and now we're both paying for it. I don't know how to move past this. I want to fix this, I pleaded. I know I messed up, but I still love you. Please don't let this be the end of us. Evan looked away, pain evident in his eyes. I don't know if I can trust you again. The hurt runs too deep. As I watched him turn away, my heart shattered all over again. This was supposed to be a chance at redemption, but instead, it felt like a trap we were both caught in. The courtroom, once a symbol of hope, had become a battleground, where love and trust were hanging by a thread. The recess felt endless, each moment stretching out like a cruel reminder of everything we had lost. I knew we had both made mistakes, but the looming question remained, could we ever find a way back to each other, or had our love become irreparably damaged? As the judge returned to deliver her decision, I held my breath, realizing that whatever happened next would change everything. In that moment, I understood that this wasn't just about the kiss or the betrayal, it was about the fragile nature of love and the lengths we would